Hi everyone, welcome to Teach English with Passion, a platform that is created to help all those teachers who strive to do their job appropriately. We present series of videos that combine theoretical knowledge and practice, showing teachers how they can design interesting teaching materials that would make both teaching and learning English more fun and more interactive. Eager to know more? Keep watching.
This is the second video in our series about teaching writing. In the first video, we have explored the different approaches to teaching writing and the different stages of the writing process. In this video, we'll be talking about another interesting topic, which is written corrective feedback. So, here we go. What's error feedback? In a teaching-learning context, error feedback is an input from a reader, who is most often the teacher, to a writer, who is the student, indicating that an error has been made. Error feedback is different from error correction, which is the overt, explicit correction of an error or a mistake. Written corrective feedback, or WCF, aids learners diagnose their mistakes, helping them reflect upon those mistakes and giving them more and more chances to self-correct those errors. Now we're going to look at some of the most common approaches to providing error feedback on learners' writing. The first approach is global correction. This implies providing feedback on every and each single mistake the learner makes. The teacher here highlights and identifies all learners' mistakes without concentrating on specific aspects of the writing or on certain types of mistakes. The selective approach is a kind of focused correction. The teacher here concentrates on certain kinds of errors, mainly those related to the material taught in class. For example, if the learner is asked to write about one's routines, the teacher, while providing feedback, can concentrate on mistakes related to the use of adverbs of frequency and the simple present. Now we're going to look at some of the techniques used while providing feedback on learners' pieces of writing. The first one is explicit correction. The teacher clearly indicates that the student's utterance is incorrect and he provides the correct form. As shown in the example, yesterday I go to the cinema. The teacher here crosses out the mistake in the verb tense and he directly provides the learner with the correct answer. The second error feedback technique is comments. They are handwritten comments which the teacher can write at the end of the piece of writing or on the margins. They take the form of praise, questions, or suggestions. Error code is a useful technique when it comes to providing error feedback on learners' pieces of writing. Error code means displaying codes that aim to point students in the direction of their error or mistake. In the first example, yesterday I go to the cinema. Instead of providing direct correction of the error, the teacher here uses the code VT to help the learner recognize that there is a problem with the verb tense of the sentence. In the second example, I live in Algeria. The teacher uses the code CAP to indicate that the learner has made a capitalization mistake.
Time for practice.
What comes after providing error feedback on learners' final drafts? As a teacher, how should I respond to my learners' pieces of writing? And are there any effective ways of doing so? These are some of the most common concerns of teachers when it comes to teaching writing. In this part, I will be sharing with you the 3 methods I implement myself in my class whenever I have a writing lesson. I will share with you how I deal with learners' pieces of writing after error feedback provision. And I would love to invite you, dear colleagues, to share with us any effective methods or strategies you have tried yourselves in your classes. So let's share and discuss things together. The first method consists of two parts. The first one is let's correct. This step aims at drawing learners' attention to the types of mistakes they have made. The teacher draws on the board the table and writes the mistakes as they appear in learners' pieces of writing. Then, learners interact with one another and with the teacher to identify the type of mistake in each sentence and to suggest and provide the correct forms. After discussing and correcting the most common mistakes of the class, the teacher moves on to the next step, which is let's write it together. Here, learners work as a class to write a model piece of writing. Each student suggests a given idea, and with the teacher's guidance, the class cooperates to produce a coherent piece of writing. The second method is a model to ameliorate. The teacher chooses an anonymous piece of writing from learners' work and makes copies for the whole class. He or she asks learners to work in pairs or in small groups to discuss the piece of writing and to correct the mistakes using the teacher's error feedback. Learners later on work as a class with the teacher's guidance to suggest any modifications or changes to get a more coherent piece of writing. The third method aims at encouraging peer correction. The teacher can apply this in two different ways. He can ask learners to exchange their final drafts, and he provides them with a peer correction checklist as the one shown here. Then he asks them to use the checklist to evaluate one another's pieces of writing. The teacher can also make learners use the checklist to reflect upon one specific piece of writing he chooses. At last, I would love to share with you these helpful tips related to error feedback provision. Tip number 1. When providing feedback, take into account the learner's level of proficiency. So the teacher here needs to personalize the way he provides error feedback depending on learner's level. This way, if the teacher has beginner students or students with a low level of proficiency, he can use direct error feedback to give them more support. Whereas, if the students are advanced, the teacher can use indirect error feedback. Tip number 2. As a teacher, you are not supposed to use one specific error feedback technique. Rather, you can use a combination of techniques when responding to learners' writing. So, on the same piece of writing, you can respond by using error codes, comments, or even direct correction. The third tip: when providing written corrective feedback on learners' writing, don't only concentrate on learners' mistakes or weaknesses. You need also to acknowledge the positive aspects in learners' performance and to point out their strengths. This really helps in fostering learner self-confidence and encourages them to make more efforts to improve their level.
That's all for today's topic. Hopefully you find it helpful and useful. If you have any questions, suggestions, or topics you want me to deal with, leave a comment below. If you like the content of the video, subscribe now and share the video with your colleagues. Stay tuned. Have a nice day. Bye.